Ruth Kobayashi, and both of my girls over a few years did R12. We were Young Women Division back then. So my kids are now a freshman at Biola and a junior at SMU. And so I'm really happy to see all you guys. And over the last 10 years, I've probably done 20 to 25,000 sugar cookies. Mostly I do them for fun to bless people. Once in a while I take orders for friends for parties and things, but it's primarily just to make people happy. So I just wanted to share with you a few things. You're going to learn a lot more after I'm done with what your cookie fundraiser is and what you're supposed to do. But a few of us kind of put it together many years ago, and it seems to work perfectly for Valentine's Day. A lot better than Super Bowl, which is how we first did it. Something about brown cookies are just not as pretty.
I've seen pictures of those brown
right?
footballs.
Right.
You
And
can't really tell.
not pretty. Yeah, exactly. So we learned a lot in those days, and so you guys get to be the benefit of the mistakes that we made. So I'm going to just tell you a couple quick things first off, and the more you keep your eyes on me, the quicker I can go, and then I can be out of your way and let you guys start your meeting. So a couple things that are really important. You're not a business, you're not a bakery, but still always wash your hands before you start baking or icing. Always have your hair pulled back. If a hair gets on anything, it now becomes your family cookie, but you do not package it with anything you're going to sell to anybody else, okay? If you mess with your hair, cough, cheat, and take a taste, then go wash your hands again. I always keep some of these nearby if I have to. So that's my quick message about keeping everything clean. Okay, so I brought some samples to show you which you guys can take and eat if you like later. But I just wanted to give you a feel for, you're gonna have different size cookie cutters. And I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of the easiest way, not necessarily the classic way that the pastry chefs would teach you, but the easiest way for somebody who's going to learn to do it super simple. And even though my way is not the pastry chef way, it's still the way I do it, 25,000 cookies later. So first of all, your supplies, super easy. Go to Michael's. If you're a baker and you have other sources, Sur La Table, online, great. But if you want to make it super simple on you, this is a big batch because I use a lot, but there's a much smaller version of this. So this is meringue powder, and this is a good basic ingredient for your royal icing. So the icing you use is called royal icing. It's meringue powder, water, and powdered sugar. And in the recipe it tells you how to do that. But this is, just so you know, there's many brands, but Michael's carries Wilton, and it's totally fine. Michael's carries different brands and container looking of the gel food coloring. Just make sure whatever food coloring you buy, it says gel food coloring, not airbrush food coloring, because there are people who do cookies differently than we're doing, who airbrush things. You just don't want to get airbrush food coloring. Okay, and then you can just ice your cookies with nothing on them, but I recommend, because it makes them sparkly and pretty, to use sanding sugar, and you can do, any Valentine color you want. I just like to warn you that red, as much as people like red, it might take this whole bottle of red to get enough red icing for the amount of cookies you have to make, and red red food coloring sometimes can get a metallic taste to it. So if you're so sold on red, you want to take that risk, go ahead, but I avoid red like the plague for those reasons. So I would recommend different shades of pink, and you can start out with your icing in a big bowl and just do a tiny bit of pink and ice some cookies, or separate out in containers like this. Then go do kind of almost an ombre, kind of approach to your icing. Then add a few more drops, and now you've got a medium pink. Separate that out and do a little disposable container, and then do a bright pink if you want some variation. Or if you want everything the same color, that's fine too. That's totally up to you. So a couple things about the cookies is, so this is the front and this is the back. So you can see how the instructions tell you how long to bake it. Every oven is different. So I recommend whatever the recipe says, go a minute or two less, and then check your cookies, and you kind of see from the top, you can barely see when you look at them on the side, just a tiny bit of a caramel color on the side. If you go dark brown, you're gonna have really crunchy cookies that are really crunchy. I like this because they kind of melt in your mouth. They don't fall apart, but they melt in your mouth. And then if it's a little undercooked to start with, just do like every 30 seconds, keep checking on your cookies. And then when they're roughly like this, and remember, yours may not be perfect, doesn't matter. I've had a lot more practice than you, so anything you do is going to be great. Don't stress. And then the consistency of your icing. So you can see how see about what that looks like, right? It slides off, but it's not going super fast. So it's not like coming right out like Elmer's glue might, you know, if you were doing that, but it's not super, super thick either. But here's the thing, I always give out my phone number in case you have a cookie emergency. You can always call me. The first year I did this, I had about 3 icing emergency texts, Mrs. Kobayashi. So here's the thing, if you get it too thin or too thick, don't get rid of it. It's all salvageable. So if it's too thin, like it's really running off, what'll happen is when you try to ice, it's gonna run off the side of your cookies. If that happens to you, while it's wet, I just do that and save it, and then wipe it off your hands and then let it dry. But add more powdered sugar. Just do like a couple tablespoons at a time to thicken it up. If you go too thick and now it's like paste, don't throw it out. A few more drops of water, thin it back out, you'll be totally fine. So you never have to worry. The only time I would discard the icing is if, it fell on the floor or something. You can use a plastic knife, a real knife, a little spatula. I really like this type of spatula, it has an angle. It's just easier, I think, to use. And I just take a little bit and I do it kind of on the bottom side here, so not the top side, the bottom, and I just start in the middle. And this is the part where, everybody's different on how good their fingers are in icing, but I start in the middle and kind of work my way out to the edges. And just do it like that. Super easy. This comes easier for some people than others, and really I want to promise you that if yours is messier than your friend who you do it with, it really doesn't matter. People love getting homemade cookies. Most people never make sugar cookies because they are labor intensive. So for people to get your sugar cookies, they will be so happy regardless of how it looks, even if it's not perfect. And I intentionally did this one so you have a little bit of edges here. So what I'm going to do, like right now, could do my finger. Oh, the other thing about red icing is your mistakes will really show on the color of that cookie. Your mistakes are much easier hidden with a light colored icing. So from here, I'm just gonna do that and kind of scrape that little edge off a little bit so it looks a little bit better. You could also use your hand. I just like the straight edge better. It's a little bit neater. And so now you can see a tiny bit under there, but it's not gonna show much. So now it really looks pretty perfect. And then the other key that I like you to do, and I'm not gonna take the time to do this now so we can get you guys on your way, but I like to do about, depending on how quick you are, anywhere from 6 to 10 cookies, God bless you, ice them before I add the sanding sugar, and that's just to let the icing set up a little bit so that when you get the sanding sugar on there, it's more on the top of the icing, it doesn't sink down and look like a bunch of dimples. So mine's gonna look a little bit like that, but if you do like every 6 to 10 cookies before you go back over with this, you'll be in good shape. And then I love to use paper plates because they act as a way to catch your extra and then funnel it back into your container. So you can do the paper plate one of 2 ways. So you've got, this is the kind I use, this is typically what you bake the cookies in. You're gonna have a cooling rack. If you have one, that would be great, that you place them on to to cool. And if you can ice them right away, but I'll show you what can happen if you ice them right away. If you can wait 2 hours before you ice them or more, that's ideal. Often if I have a lot, you guys have a decent quantity you're having to do, I would bake one day and ice the next. If you can, that's ideal. So plan that accordingly. And then with the paper plate, you can stick your plate, like underneath the rack and just move it along. You can lift the cookie out and do that, but every time you lift a cookie with wet icing, you might get a thumbprint in it. So what I'm doing right now for the purpose of demonstration is not actually usually how I do it. I try to handle it as little as possible and just run the paper plate underneath the cooling rack. And then everybody's different on how much they like to add. I like a lot of sanding sugar on mine, so it really covers it up and it really glistens. And then right now I'm gonna shake it off like this. But typically what I do is I let it all set and dry, and then a couple hours later, then I go around and I'll lift it up, the dry cookies off, and then shake them on here. Then when I'm done, because there's no reason not to reuse this, it hasn't touched anything that's not clean or anything, then I just make a funnel out of that. And then put it back in there. Oop, didn't make a good funnel, but you know what I mean. And then the other thing is I like to try to cover my counter or my kitchen table with just towels or something, because it can get messy, depending on what your tolerance is for mess in your house. And then let me just show you a few other things. So I know I told you what I was going to do, show you what can happen. This is a little bit hard to see from a distance, but I iced these because I was in a rush the other day. Yesterday, I iced these. Well, they had just come out of the oven. So you can see, if you look really carefully, a little bit of fading, almost looks a little white in the center. That's a little discoloration. It's because of the butter content in the cookie. That'll do that if you do it while it's still warm. Doesn't hurt anything, doesn't taste weird, but so if you have to rush, you're fine. But if you have a chance to let a day go by, then you're really great. And then the other thing I wanted to show you, these are getting, I'm not going to put my hand in my hair because I'm touching cookies, but this is getting to be a really popular look these days. There's companies that sell these online, that's where I buy them, but you can do it yourself. If you're wanting to do something different, and I wouldn't recommend trying to learn how to pipe icing. That takes a lot of practice, and I'm still not good at it, so I would just say forget that. But if you want to do something fancier, and you don't need to, but if you want to do a few, these little sugar pearls or different things they sell at Michael's. And all these are prepackaged this way, but they mixed them all up. So they mix like white, pink, big and small sugar pearls all in one thing like this, and then put them on it. And so that's kind of a cute look. But that's about it. Anybody have any questions? And then
how did you get all the white ones? Did you have one that it's just white or not mixed?
Right. Yeah. So you can buy just white ones. Like they'll sell these. I forgot what they call them, but these straight ones, they'll sell those at Michael's. They'll sell the pearls and the little pearls, and you can always just mix them all up if you want to have kind of a variety. And I think it's pretty, like when you bag the cookies, I think you do 3 cookies per bag?
Yep.
If you're going to do anything fancier, put that on the top cookie, because then that shows for the bag, and then leave the plain ones down below.
Is there a particular dough recipe that we need to use?
Yes, you have my recipe. That's the recipe that you guys have.
I have it.
Yeah, you guys have all that. Yeah.
Can I ask some?
Yes.
My problem last year was in cooking the dough.
Yes.
I probably made 2 recipes, and
What was your challenge?
the challenge was that they were not staying really like hearts. They were kind of spreading a lot.
Oh, okay. That could be. Had your dough gone in the refrigerator?
I can't remember.
Okay.
But I think so.
Okay.
I mean, I usually like to put my dough in the refrigerator, so.
Okay, so
Does
probably
that
what
happen?
that, no, that's what I do too. Probably
Okay.
all that happened was when you because when you refrigerate your dough, it gets really hard. Like, you can't really work with it, it's so hard.
Right.
Then you let it come to not quite room temperature, but you let it soften up a little bit. You may have let it soften just a little bit too long, and then it'll
Okay.
spread.
Okay.
But if you take it out to when it's still a little hard, you know, when you use the rolling pin,
Yeah.
you really got to work it.
Okay.
That's when I do. So maybe I would say for me, probably 10 minutes before I preheat the oven is when I take my dough out of the refrigerator.
Okay.
And then another trick, if you guys, because you guys are really busy with school, if you make your dough and you need to start cooking right away, but it's going to take a few hours to get cold in the refrigerator, you can stick it in the freezer for like 30 minutes and then take it out, and that'll give you a shortcut if you want to save some time.
Okay.
But that would be my only suggestion is just don't let, if the dough is getting really, really soft, that
Yeah.
it's hard to put the cookie cutter in, it's too
Okay.
soft. That's probably what
Yeah, it
happened.
was like getting flat and spreading and then.
Yeah, that's, unless for some reason you put more butter in than the recipe called for. That would be the other thing in baking that could happen, but it's more
Okay.
likely you just let the dough get a little bit too
I
soft.
blamed my oven, but it probably wasn't.
It's always good to blame the oven. Yeah. When in doubt, blame the oven.
It's like we need to.
Any girls have any questions? Any girls? No? You guys all good? Are you excited about making cookies? So your friends will like them if you make them.
Well, yours are so.
Yeah, they look
Oh,
good.
okay. Anybody who I'm going to take this container back with me. Anyone who would like a wet one, a plain one that's not iced, or one that was made last night, help yourself. And if anybody asks you about nuts, you guys, the recipes have no nuts. There are no nuts. If somebody has to have a nut-free kitchen, most of us don't have nut-free kitchens, but there are no nut products in the recipe for the cookies or the icing, so they're safe.